Good morning, everyone, and welcome from sunny Sofia. It has been raining as hell for the last couple of days here, but it's hopefully very sunny and nice today. I hope that you can all see me and hear me well. And I want to say that it's a pleasure for me to be with you and to be part of the Transform for Europe project. And I would like to thank you for showing interest in today's topic. And it's really great that I'll have the chance to share and discuss with you my ideas of workplace writing. I hope that you are actually in a good mood and you're ready to develop further your workplace writing skills and invest a lot of time today in doing that. I will also want to extend my gratitude to the organizers and thank them for giving me the opportunity to take part in this project and to deliver this webinar, and of course for their excellent work and support. First of all, I would like to say a few words about myself. My name is Lika Pishtalova. I represent Sofia University, and today I'm here in my capacity as professional development instructor, but I'm an associate professor at the Department of English and American Studies at Sofia University. My primary research interest is in the field of translation studies, and I teach a course in general translation theory to fourth year students, as well as a practical course in translating literary texts from English, from Bulgarian into English. We work with contemporary Bulgarian authors mainly. And along with my experience of teaching translation, I have also had the chance to practice both translation and interpreting, as I have been working as a translator for the last 15 years and as a conference interpreter as well. So in addition to translation, I also have an academic interest in intercultural communication, and more specifically intercultural business communication. And this is a topic that has been gaining popularity for the last 10 years and which has attracted the interest of linguists, communication experts, sociologists, psychologists, etc. And there are many reasons for that, of course, the most important of which have to do with globalization on the one hand and digitalization on the other. And we all know that businesses have gone global, and business professionals have been required to communicate internationally almost all the time. And in most of the cases, they're required to communicate in a language which is not their mother tongue. And I think today's event is an illustration of that and a proof of that, because I don't know how many of you are native speakers of English. And so that means that undoubtedly English has become the global lingua franca, which is something we are going to mention in the course of today's webinar. But another thing which is worth mentioning is that more and more companies, more and more institutions are adopting English as their corporate language, which means that their employees and workers are supposed to use it in their day-to-day work. What is more, the development of technologies and digitalization have also changed the way in which business professionals interact, requiring them to acquire new skills and to develop new competences. So research has been done on identifying the difficulties and challenges professionals face in spoken and written communication in the workplace, with a view to helping them improve their skills and contribute to achieving the business objectives of their organizations. But why is workplace writing important? What do you think? Because there are many people, high-level managers included, who take writing for granted, and they don't realize the impact it has on the image of the organization and the company, and the implementation of its business practices and objectives. So the present webinar has been designed around the concept of workplace writing, but there are other terms used to refer to the same concept. For example, professional writing, business writing, and work-related writing. So these are all terms that are used to refer to the same concept. But the basic idea behind using this concept is to, so to say, distinguish it from other types of writing, for example, personal writing or academic writing. So today's talk will be focused mainly on writing in the workplace. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my presentation. Okay. Okay, I don't know whether you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good.
Yes, perfectly.
Just a second, I'm sorry. Okay, so why is workplace writing important? Actually, we don't realize, but when we experience an organization or a company, we experience it mostly through its written content. For example, the website of the organization or the social media they have, or the emails we get from them, different reports, etc. So we can say that business writing heavily influences the client's experience of an organization, and improving writing quality will certainly make a positive difference in how people experience and view your organization. So this slide shows that actually businesses lose money, enormous amounts of money, due to the poor writing skills of their employees and their workers. Okay, you can see the the extreme amount of money that American businesses lose on an annual basis because of the fact that their employees cannot write well or are not trained enough to produce good quality business writing. So if we have to compare poor business writing with effective or efficient business writing, we can see the numerous ways in which this could influence the image of an organization. So poor business writing costs sales and businesses. It also costs time. It can damage the reputation of the respective business or institution. It can hurt the brand. It can be dangerous even in some cases, and it means lost ideas. We have all seen, for example, voiceovers of advertisements which are done in poor English, somebody reading something in poor English. And we have also seen some translation fails in hotels, for example, full of grammatical errors, etc. And this is certainly not good for the image of your organization or company. Okay, so the present seminar has been designed around the concept of business writing, and there are a number of objectives it has. So the first objective has to do with introducing participants to the concept of workplace writing, which we are going to do in a minute, to help participants develop their skills and confidence in planning, researching, drafting, and revising different workplace documents like emails, reports, etc. To equip participants with various strategies, techniques, and tips for composing productive messages that are concise, that are targeted, and that are aimed at accomplishing business objectives. And last but not least, the webinar has been designed to raise your awareness with respect to the different methods through which the writing skills of employees could be improved. And that could happen, as you can see, through coaching, language auditing, and training. In terms of content, the 3 sessions will contain the following information. Our first session will cover the nature of workplace writing, approaches to writing business messages, and overview of written workplace genres. The second session will focus on business letters, memoranda, and business emails. And within the third session, we are going to discuss the production of project proposals, report writing, and press releases. So before we start with the actual content, we need to do 3 things. Identify your needs, because I don't know you. I mean, I know that you're representatives of university institutions, and the information I have is that most of you represent the administrative staff of the university, the respective universities. But in addition to that, I don't know more about you. So I would like to get more information so that I know who I'm talking to. Then on the basis of who you are, we are going to formulate the expectations as far as this webinar is concerned and agree on a methodology that we are going to use. Of course, I have prepared certain content, but I just want to be able to adapt it to your needs. Sorry for that. Okay. So in order to do that, I have prepared 7 questions for you. And they're on the slide that you see. I want you to take a look at those questions and briefly answer each one of those in the chat. Thank you very much for your contributions, and Now, once we know more about you, I would like to suggest the methodology that we are going to rely on in the course of this webinar. So first of all, we are going to have the presentation, of course, the slides that you see in front of you. We are going to have discussions and Q&A sessions, also brainstorming exercises and breakout rooms. And last but not least, we are going to focus on some texts, sample texts, and we are going to analyze them and try to produce parts of those texts in the breakout rooms. We'll move on to the first session. The content of the first session. This is the outline, the nature of workplace writing, approaches to producing workplace documents, and overview of some written workplace genres. Of course, I have to say here that our talk is focused on written workplace communication, and there is spoken workplace communication, which consists of a number of spoken genres such as phone calls, business calls, negotiations, different meeting formats, etc., etc. Unfortunately, they're not the focus of our attention, but many of the principles that are that apply to written workplace communication are relevant to spoken business communication as well. So I want you to think about business writing and try to describe it using 4 keywords, which are the first words that come to your mind when you think about writing in the workplace, writing for professional purposes, writing for business purposes. Okay, can you write them down in the chat, please, so that I can hear, get an idea of what you're thinking. What I have for you in terms of features of workplace writing. So one of the most important distinguishing features is that it takes place in professional or workplace setting. If it doesn't take place in such a setting, then we are not talking about workplace writing. Why is that important? Because we need to take into account the organizational context, because workplace communication and written communication in particular takes place in a specific organizational context. For example, in the organizational context of your universities. And you agree that, I'm sure you will agree, that there will be a difference between the organizational context offered by a higher education institution and the organizational context offered by a company in the IT sector, for example, or in the pharmaceutical sector. So this is very important, because all those conventions, all those practices that are typical of the organization or company are reflected in the business writing of its employees. The second characteristics is that exactly what I said, that it reflects, workplace writing reflects the processes and practices and constraints of the workplace. Can you think of a constraint in your workplace? I mean, when it comes to writing, Can you think of a constraint that you have, kind of limitation, something that you are not allowed to do or that you have to do in a certain way? I'll give you an example with the business context, for example. If you are a regular employee, you cannot write directly to the CEO of the company, right? If you have some concerns or some urgent matters to be addressed, you would have to write to your supervisor or to your line manager rather than writing directly to the CEO, right? So this is a constraint. This is an example of a constraint in workplace communication. Anna Maria, you have raised your hand.
Yes, I think another constraint could be that sometimes information has to be depicted in a very positive way, even though the issue maybe has also negative sides, but you're not allowed to express the full range of the issue for strategic reasons.
Okay, good. That's a very good point. Thank you. And we are going to talk about negative information in a couple of minutes, because not always you are supposed to convey good news, good positive information. In many situations in the workplace, you have to say something which is negative, and you have to know how to say it, in what tone, you need to know the strategies you might use. Why? Because you might hurt the feelings of your business partners or clients or students in your case. I mean, you have to know how to convey the bad news, how to convey the bad message, and that's really important. And that's also a constraint, of course. I mean, this type of communication is not the same as personal communication. Of course, there are many similarities, of course, because we are humans, but still, business communication is very specific and much more sensitive in certain aspects. Good. The third characteristic feature of workplace writing is that it is connected to the concept of rhetoric, which has to do with persuading the audience. And this is very relevant when we talk about promotion materials, for example. Does any one of you work for the marketing department or the, I don't know, universities usually have marketing departments, right? That the department which promotes the activities of the university, the programs of the university, etc., etc. So you need to be able to produce materials that persuade students, potential students, to come and attend a program at your university. And to that purpose, you need to be able to use persuasive language. And that's the nature of workplace communication. If you work in sales, for example, you need to be able to know how to sell products, how to convince potential clients to purchase your products or services. And this characteristic means that very often as business communicators, you need to deal with difficult persuasive situations. It's not that easy. I mean, it's not that I come to you and I say, well, buy this product. And I mean, the person you're talking to does what you say. It is much more than that, okay? And finally, workplace writing involves clear language in conveying information that should be easily understood by the intended audience. You need to be very clear in what you say. You need to, be able to use language that is clear, that is succinct, that is to the point, okay? Oftentimes, you need to be able to adapt messages to audiences. So, which means that you need to know your audience in business communication. So, to summarize what I just said, we have workplace writing at the center, and the three factors that influence it or have a very strong impact on it: persuasive content, rhetorical awareness, and workplace context. Okay, so when we talk about categories of business messages, we could divide them into three groups in terms of their content. The first group of messages, and this is something that Anna Maria just mentioned, a first group of messages, these are positive messages. There is nothing special about that. You have to convey information that is positive, that is not threatening, that, I mean, there is nothing special about it. The second group of messages are the so-called persuasive messages, aimed at persuading others to act in a way, in a certain way, by changing their opinion about a service or a product. And the last group of messages are the negative messages. Those messages are the most difficult to produce because they might hurt the reader's feelings or cause them to lose face. They may damage the quality of the relationship between the reader and the writer. And this is certainly something that you don't want to have in business communication. You don't want to damage your relationship with your client or with your partner or with your, in your case, with the students you work with. This is something that you have to avoid at all means. Okay, so those categories basically determine the approaches to producing certain messages. When we have positive messages, we usually use the direct approach. That is, we have something to say and we simply say it. The reader is expected to agree with the contents of the message. And when we have to convey bad news or to say something negative to someone, we need to use the indirect approach. Why? Because the reader may be opposed to what we say, to what we propose. They might be disinterested in what we propose, or they may not be able to comply. So the conclusion is that the more negative and the more persuasive a message is in a workplace writing context, the more resistance it involves on the part of the person you're writing to, and the more planning it involves on your part. So let's give an example. You are the HR manager, or you are one of the HR managers at the HR department of your university. And you have announced a competition for, let's say, a new colleague in the department, in the HR department. And you wrote a job announcement and you organize the application process, etc., etc. You organize the interviews, and you came up with a very good candidate. So you need to produce, as a result of this competition, you need to produce two types of letters. An acceptance letter or a letter of approval that you have to send to the selected candidate, the candidate approved for the position, and a rejection letter to all other applicants. So which would be easier for you to produce and which would require more planning? I just want to hear your thoughts on that. Anyone working for an HR department? Okay, no one. Bernice, are you raising your hand? Anna Maria?
Yes, I do not directly work for the HR department, but I'm sometimes in contact with topics concerning HR. And I imagine it might be more difficult to produce a negative letter. Or because, on the one hand, because there are more people that will receive it and that carry the risk of complaining about the reasons why they have been rejected, or they might have an influence because they could tell in their particular field of friends and colleagues that they have been treated in a negative way, and this might negatively influence the reputation of the
institution. Right, that's right, of course. So you have to approach this as a very sensitive issue, and you have to be very careful in terms of organizing your message, in terms of deciding how to present this unsuccessful applicant with the bad news. So there are different approaches. Of course, nobody has said you are forbidden to use the direct approach in conveying bad news. But we have a concept known as the bad news formula. And bad news has been defined, in a journalistic context, bad news is the good news, but bad news has been defined as news involving the reader's ego, violating the reader's expectations and provoking an unpleasant reaction on the part of the readers and making them feel threatened in some way. So that's why the bad news formula consists of 4 steps: the delaying opening, the reasons behind your decision, and the bad news itself, followed by a positive ending. So you should always end on a positive note. And what is the purpose of this approach, of this formula? First, to transmit the bad news clearly, because you have to be clear about that. You say, well, you have not been selected for this position because of some reasons, but you need to be clear on that. And the second purpose is to maintain the reader's goodwill. That is, regardless of the fact that you haven't approved this particular candidate this time, doesn't mean that he or she might be suitable for another position at your institution, okay? So, I don't know, there are people who say that the delayed opening is much more threatening, and is kind of offensive to the person you are talking to. There are many advocates of the direct approach to bad news, by the way. But I think that in most of the situations, the delayed opening is the better option. What do you think? And how do you, do you see any relation between personal communication? For example, if you want to say something bad to a friend, or if you want to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, do you go to them and say, well, I want to break up with you? And then you say, because I don't like you, because we are not going in the same direction, etc., etc. Or do you go to them and say, well, things have not been going well, etc., etc., and you spend 15 minutes explaining things, and then finally you say, and I've taken this decision. I mean, you have to use a very balanced approach to bad news. And you have to know how much time you can use for, or how much text or writing you can use for this delaying opening. If we move on to persuasive writing, text types, characteristic of persuasive writing: sales letters, marketing materials, brochures, leaflets, flyers. If you work for a tourist agency, if you work for the marketing department of a university, if you are a salesperson, if you are a writer of TV commercials, you have to produce explicitly persuasive content. And there are different degrees of persuasion you could use. And this depends on the type of product or service you are trying to sell. So if you want to sell something which is of excellent quality and which is not very expensive, that is value for money, then you shouldn't be that persuasive, because the potential buyers, the potential clients, would be eager to buy the product or the service. But if there are some characteristics which are not that acceptable, then you need to be more inventive, more creative, and more persuasive in your approach. Usually the persuasive approach takes place in 5 steps. And this is the approach is known as the AIDA approach, AIDCA. So you, first of all, have to get the attention of the potential client or customer. Then you need to provoke their interest. Once you have done that, you have to make them want this product or service. Then you have to convince them to buy it and make them act. Just to illustrate the situation, you are selling very expensive cars. Imagine you're selling very expensive cars. And there is a potential customer who seemingly knows your brand. So he knows that this is a high quality brand, that the cars you sell are really excellent. And you don't have to do much to get his attention or interest or desire to buy your cars. But the cars are very expensive. So you need to convince this client to spend the money on this particular car. And this is, this is the difficult thing. This is the difficult part of your job. So there are different ways through which you can persuade people to do things. You can use, on the one hand, you can rely on reason, on data, on statistical information to say that something is good, of good quality, that something is worth buying. Or you can use the emotional approach. And this approach is used when it comes to products or services that are related to people's emotions, personal life, memories, etc., etc. For example, if you want to sell a trip to an exotic destination, then it might be justified to use emotional reasons and to be emotional in your persuasion. But when you have to sell, for example, technical equipment or cars or some sort of technology, then you might rely on statistics, on experiments or things that have been done to prove the effectiveness and the quality of those products. Just want to introduce you to written workplace genres. Of course, there are many more, but we're going to focus on some genres that you use in your workplace. So the types of workplace documents we are going to focus on. First, business letters, emails and memos. Are you familiar with the memo genre? Have you used it for in any situation? Do you know what a memo is, in other words?
No, I don't know what a memo is. No?
Okay, good. That's good to know. Because I think memos are more popular, more common in the business sectors, in companies, not that much in institutions or organizations. Okay, then we are going to say a few words about reports, proposals, and press releases, which are not included in this list here. Of course, each one of those documents have to meet certain formal conventions, and those conventions relate to design and layout. And in addition to these formal conventions, they have to they're produced on the basis of some procedural knowledge. So this means you need to be aware of the procedure, of the organizational practice, to be able to produce this document or that document. So we continue with the specific workplace genres. In the course of this session, we're going to talk about business letters, memoranda, and business emails. Okay, so when we talk about business letters, this is the most common, so to say, genre in business writing, which has been modified over the last 10 years, let's say, and many authors and researchers think of the email, for example, as an informal version of a business letter. So we are going to talk about business letters, memoranda, the difference between memoranda and business letters, and we are going to say some specific things about emails being a less formal version of business letters. So in terms of purpose, business letters have to do with correspondence between two businesses or between a business and an individual. And by business here, we mean any sort of company, institution, organization. And we can have business to business type of letters or business to client type. In the business to business type, this is communication between two institutions, whereas in the business to client, we have communication between an institution, a company, or an organization, and an individual who might be a client, a partner, etc. Another important point that has to be made is that in most of the cases, letters, business letters, are used for the so-called external business communication. That is, colleagues do not exchange business letters, right? You write a business letter if you want to write to somebody who is external to your organization. There are different types of business letters depending on the purpose they want to achieve. We can have sales letters, letters of request if you want to get more information about something. We can have letters of recommendation in the context of HR. Also cover letter, or letter of rejection that I mentioned, letter of acceptance or letter of rejection in the HR context. In the sales context, we can have a letter of complaint when you complain about a product, or when you write to a business because you are not satisfied with the quality of a product you purchased. Can you think of other types of business letters that are not mentioned on the slide and that you use in your everyday practice? No?
Well, it's not a letter, it's, we call it here opinions.
Opinion.
Yeah, the opinions, for example, if someone is writing to me and asking me about legal basis for data processing, so I have to give it the back opinion in form of opinion. Opinion.
But do you make the distinction between a document that you have to send and the accompanying letter? Because very often somebody's microphone has not been switched off. Okay, thank you. So you have to distinguish between situations in which you send a document, for example, a report, and you send it to an external institution with a letter that accompanies this document, this report. So the report is an attachment. It serves as an attachment to the letter, right? Is this the sort of document you are talking about, Bernice?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It's a sort of a document which I attached. Okay.
And the letter says, please find attached this document, etc. Okay. Good. So there are many different sorts of business letters depending on the purpose they want to accomplish. So here we have a business letter structure. I was initially, I planned to send those documents to you through the chat, but since we don't have a chat, I don't know how this can happen. I might ask the organizers to distribute a number of attached files to you. Would that be okay? So the sample business letter would be one of those documents.
Yes, of course.
Right. Okay, I'll ask the organizers to do that. So basically, you are all familiar with the structure of a business letter. You have a return address, a letter address, and you see this letter, I don't know how well you can see it, but it is written on a template. And the heading has the address of the sending organization. And the so-called inside address is the address of the institution or individual you're writing to. Then you have the salutation, the body, the complimentary closing, and the signature. And you may or may not have an attachment to the letter or an enclosure. So the important points here: salutation. How do you address a person in a letter? I think this is an issue someone raised. Are you confident as to what sort of address you should use when writing a business letter? So first of all, you have to distinguish between situations in which you're writing to somebody you don't know. And you just know his or her name, you know his or her position, and you write to them for the first time. And there might be cases in which you know this person. Although this is, what I'm saying is more valid with respect to writing business emails because they're less formal. In this case, when you send a letter to somebody, it would be very formal. And in most of the cases, you would use a formal address like dear Mr. etc. or Miss etc. What happens if you don't know whether the person you're writing to, you don't know their name, you don't know who you are writing to? How do you address such letters? Alexander, from your point of view of a native speaker, what can you say about this?
So I've always been taught to start with "to whom it may concern."
Right.
As a very general one, but if you have as say for the editor of a journal as an example, or a rector, you would write the title and you put the "dear rector" or something like that as a very neutral way of avoiding any misunderstanding.
But that's in case you know the person you're writing to.
Yeah, but it also works in case you don't know the gender of the person.
Yeah, the gender, right. But if you don't know you don't know who you're writing to, in addition to whom it may concern, you can also use "dear sir" / "madam." That's also used. But the most common is "to whom it may concern." So if you don't know the gender, you can find some ways to avoid using the title in front of the name by using their job function or their position, etc. Okay, what's the link between the salutation and the signature? So for example, if you don't know who you're writing to, how are you going to close the letter? How are you going to sign it? Do you know what's the difference between sincerely yours or yours sincerely and faithfully yours? This is a bit old-fashioned, but when you don't know the person you're writing to, you use faithfully yours, and when you know the person, you use sincerely or yours sincerely. Of course, this is when we speak about formal letters, very formal letters. Otherwise, when we write letters in the form of emails, we can end an email using different phrases, and those phrases differ in terms of their level of formality. For example, we can say kind regards, best regards, best, and many other variations. So how do you usually end your emails when you write to colleagues, friends, partners, students? What's the usual signature you use?
For example, I use always. Okay.
Okay.
Because because I correspondence with our partners from our international projects. I know all of them, even if I haven't met them face to face. So I use best regards, sometimes best if this some kind of a part of long correspondence between us.
Right.
But I think that's quite nice because it means that we know it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So you can use those varying levels of formality depending on many factors. How so first, whether you know the person, for how long you have been communicating with them. Of course, the longer you communicate with somebody, the less formal you become in your way of addressing them or in a way of writing to them. Of course, you still stick to the business tone, right? But there are different ways in which you can close a letter. Kind regards with kind regards, best regards, best, or just regards. Many people use simply regards, which is quite okay. Good. And the attachment is usually, so it is mentioned in the end of the letter, right after the signature. So how about the punctuation? Because there are different standards you may use. British, American, they have different punctuation rules. For example, do you use a comma or do you use a colon after the salutation? Alexander, I'm interested in your experience as a native speaker.
In my education, we've always been taught to use commas. We tend to, but this is Canada. So we tend to stay away from using colons and semicolons in order to differentiate between things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are, for example, British speakers who use nothing. For example, they say, "Dear Lika," without any punctuation mark. And when they close the letter, rather than using a comma, they say they don't use punctuation mark again. So kind regards, no punctuation mark, and the name. So I think comma is the most common, and it's okay if you use the comma. In Bulgarian, for example, which is, I don't know whether there are any Bulgarian participants, by the way, in this webinar, but when we use dear in Bulgarian, we need to write a comma right after dear. So you have two commas, dear, comma, the name, comma, which is a bit complicated. Okay, but you have to pick up a standard and stick to it. And that's the most important in this situation. And that's the advice I would give you. If you decide to use a comma, use commas throughout for the salutation and for the signature or the closing. If you decide to use a colon, use a colon. If you decide to use no punctuation, then stick to that throughout. Good. The body of the letter, of course, consists of a number of paragraphs. In most of the cases, it consists of 1, 2, up to 2 paragraphs. And it is rare to have a letter with a body consisting of more than 2 or more than 3 paragraphs. And you use certain logic to organize your letter. So you have usually a problem and you offer a solution to the problem. Or if you have a problem, you ask for the institution, right, or the person you're writing to provide a solution to that problem. But your letter should be well structured, so it should follow a logical structure to be effective and to produce the desired effect. So what's the difference between a letter and a memo or a memorandum, also known as a memo for short? Memorandum is a Latin word used for something to be remembered. And memoranda represent brief in-house correspondence, which could be either inter or intra-departmental communication. And this correspondence is usually aimed at solving some problems. What is different when we talk, I mean, what makes memos different from business letters is that memos are never distributed outside the organization or the company. They are in-house correspondence, in-house communication. And for that reason, for that purpose, they do not require an inside address, a salutation, or a complimentary closing. Memos could be formal or informal, written on paper or sent through email, addressed to one person or more, or a group of people within the whole company. For example, you can write a memo and address it to the to all employees of the finance department or all employees of the HR department. Okay, this is a memo structure. This is how a memo looks like. It looks pretty much like an email. And it consists of, this is the header, the heading of the organization. And here you see the person sending the memo, writing the memo, and who the memo is addressed to. And then finally, you have the so-called subject line. Usually, a memo consists of 3 paragraphs: an opening segment, a discussion segment, and a closing segment. In the opening segment, you present the content, the problem, the solution, or the purpose. Then you provide supporting details in the discussion segment, and in the closing segment, you make the people this memo is addressed to act in some sort of way, in some way. So usually a memo takes not more than 1 page. It is a very brief document, and the subject line is very important. Why? Because just like the subject line of emails, why do you think the subject line is so important? And do you use subject lines in your practice, in your workplace writing? Anyone?
I try to use them for getting the attention of whoever I want to read, because most of the time, whether it's an email or it's a letter I have to send to someone, the subject line is the best way to tell people what I want, and that what I have to tell them is relevant.
Right, and I think that that's one of the rules of email communication, to always use a subject line. It's considered highly unprofessional if you don't use subject lines. And subject lines are important because of several reasons. You know that business professionals very often are quite busy. So they don't have time to read every single email that they get in their email box. And when they scan the subject lines, they can easily prioritize and decide which mail to read first and which to postpone for later. So this is one reason. And the subject lines should be composed in such a way as to really say to the recipient what's the purpose of the message. They don't have to be very general, and they don't have to be very specific at the same time. I mean, you have to be, this is a special skill that you need to develop to formulate subject lines. Very often, business professionals send emails which consist of subject lines only. Have you received such emails? The content of the whole email, actually, this is something very short. Please, the meeting for 1 p.m. has been confirmed, and that is written in the subject line, and that's the whole email. Okay, have you received mails like that?
No, I haven't.
No?
I get them repeatedly.
Really? All right. Do they get them from native speakers of English, or that is not a factor? I mean, you get them from everybody.
I get them from pretty much everybody. At the moment, with the project I work on, I tend to get them a lot from either a Spanish partner or an Italian partner. Yeah,
that's mainly done for the purpose of saving time. I mean, yeah, it's very common. But that's, I mean, the important point here is that you need to use the subject line, and you need to be able to formulate subject lines that are effective and that really say what is there in the document. And that applies both to memos and business emails. So usually when we write memos, I said that they consist of 3 paragraphs: the opening, the discussion segment, and the closing segment. And you can use different plan of organizing your memo. The direct plan is when you start with the most important points in the beginning and then move to supporting details. That's an approach used in journalism, and it's called the inverted pyramid approach. Have you heard of it? So you start with something very general, usually answering all the WH question: what is going to happen, when, where, who is going to take part in it, etc. And this is usually 1 sentence or 2 sentences. And then you narrow down the information you present using different details that support the first paragraph. You can use the indirect plan, present the evidence first and arrive at a conclusion on the basis of the facts. Or you can use a balanced plan, particularly useful when delivering bad news. And this plan combines information and persuasion. So the functions of the memo, usually related to the daily operations of the company. And here you can have, you see situations in which memos could be used. For example, setting an agenda, announcing or changing a company policy or procedure. Who might produce such a memo? Announcing or changing a company policy.
Human resources?
Right. The head of human resources might be the author of the memo. And who do you think they can send this memo to? Internally, I mean, within the organization. To all staff, maybe, if these are procedures or policies that concern all employees. Or, for example, let's see other situations. Clarifying or summarizing an issue. Who might send such a memo to whom?
Manager to the subordinates?
Yeah, for example, if they had a meeting and they discussed, I mean, let's say the CEO had a meeting with the heads of all departments within the organization, and they discussed an issue of importance. And after the end of the meeting, the CEO sends a memo addressed to all those heads of departments, asking for clarification of certain decisions that were taken during the meeting or something like that. Alerting readers to a problem or a deadline. Calling a meeting. Reminding readers about a meeting. Providing documentation. I can write a memo to you if you are my colleagues, let's say, and say, please find attached my latest article published in this or that journal. And this is a memo within the, communication within the organization. Summarizing a long report or proposal. This is also very common because sometimes business professionals don't have the time to read long reports. And you provide the summary of the report in a memo and send the whole report with this memo to the respective person. Congratulating a co-worker on their birthday or on their anniversary or I don't know what. So these are all relevant topics for writing a memo. Resigning your post. Okay, so then we come to emails. Emails are considered to be the informal version of business letters. And there are some unwritten rules of writing emails. Before that, I just want to ask you whether you're familiar with the following abbreviations used in email communication, and do you happen to use them? Do you know what CC and BCC stand for? And how often do you use them and in what context, in what situations?
Normally I use CC or BCC when I'm telling the person who I'm directly sending the email to who else is involved. But I don't know COB, VS RE or TBF. I don't know those.
Okay, you don't know those. All right. So COB means close of business. FYI, sorry, for your information. VSRE, a very short reply expected. And TBF, to be forwarded. When you say send an email to someone and you want them to forward this email to somebody else, you simply write TBF and the person they have to forward it to. So do you use BCC, and do you think it's not very polite or even mean to use BCC? If you use BCC, that means that, and you use a CC and as well, this means that the email would be sent to the original recipient, first of all, and the CC, the copied party, will get this email, but the original recipient will know that this person, the CC, has received the email as well. But that is not the case with the BCC, because it is the blind carbon copy. This means that only you know that this person in the BCC will get the email along with the original recipient and the CC. First of all, you have to be comprehensive and yet direct, which means that you have to write emails in such a way as to anticipate the information the recipient needs or wants to know. And in this way, you will eliminate the need for multiple emails. You have to be comprehensive, think of the who, what, when, where, etc. for each point you make, and use bullet points or separate short paragraphs to highlight information in a way which is digestible and easy to understand by the recipient. You have to be accurate and specific, and to always double check dates, times, names, to make sure that the day of the week matches the calendar date, and clarify time zones if you are communicating with international partners. So these are details you have to be very careful about. Of course, be free of grammatical errors is something that is clear. Do not rely only on the spelling and autocorrect function, because sometimes they might be misleading. And to always reread your email before you send it. To use the proper tone. You have to be able to know whether your tone is too demanding, whether it is judgmental, whether it is too formal or too informal, or apologetic, something that we spoke about. So, finding the right tone can be tricky. And here are a few examples that I would like to give you. When asking, imagine that you have to write an email asking for a deliverable to be due by a certain date. And you can write the following: I need the document by close of business tomorrow. Is that okay? In terms of tone.
I think so.
You think so? Don't you think it's too demanding?
It could use a please in front of it.
Yeah, okay, if you use please, it's different. But you can also write down the following. I would appreciate you emailing me the document by this date. Please let me know if you have any concerns. And I mean, you're saying the same thing basically, but in a much, in a way which is much more polite, and I don't know, it the tone is more friendly, maybe. I think the first example was really too demanding, and you can write such a thing only if you're I don't know, writing to people who are I don't think it's okay.
You're right. I think you're right with I would appreciate. But it also, but also I would also interpret it, I would appreciate, okay, I have a little bit of wiggle room in time. Like even if I don't get it today, I'll be fine with it tomorrow.
Yeah, it's very, the first one is very direct. You're right. Yeah. Okay, so, I agree.
So that's my only native speaker comment.
Yeah. It depends on how urgent it really is, because if you say I would appreciate, that leaves room for, okay, I agree. Good. When you are starting email, can you start an email by writing, how is it going? Or it is much better if you say, I hope you're doing well, or something. I mean, that's a very basic example, but it illustrates how important tone is in email writing. So there are some fails in producing emails. And to start with the email addresses, I don't know whether you have experience with students, but recently I got an email from a student and his email address was Darth Vader at something, or hot chick at something, which is, it is funny, it's very funny, but I mean, this is something that students need to know. And of course, you can see various examples like this, not only in the professional community, but in the student community, but also in professional communities. People having email addresses which are not appropriate, which do not contain their real names, etc., etc. Okay, so what else? Can you think of some funny emails you have received or some funny situations? Before I share more of mine. Do you know what a chain email is?
An email which is forwarded from one person to the other and it just keeps going.
Right. These are really boring. I mean, you have to avoid using chain emails. And also, when you use the reply and the reply all option, you have to be very careful, because sometimes when the email you get contains a name in the CC line, that means that you need to reply to that person who has been CC'd as well. And you can do that by using the reply all option, right? Very often you use the reply option and your reply doesn't get to the CC'd person. This is also tricky. When you write to somebody on a certain topic, let's say, or on a certain issue, you use the reply option. So there is a virtual discussion going on. But when you want to write to the same person on a different topic, you have to start a new sequence, so to say. You have to start writing a new email with a new subject line and all that. Do you use the high priority option, and how often?
Rarely.
Rarely.
Yeah, very rarely.
Okay.
I've never used it.
Okay.
Yes, I never used it. So
It might be convenient sometimes if you are really using this option signals the recipient that you expect them to reply as soon as possible. And what's the standard? How, I mean, you have to reply within what period of time usually? Do you have a standard?
I think for me, it would be, if I was to use it, I would say as soon as possible, like, or maybe within the next hour or two, depending on where they are. For example, if it's a scientist and they're in the lab, I probably would expect it to be within an hour or two. But if they're an administrator, hopefully within 30 minutes. I don't know if my mind's way out there, so if anybody else can correct me, that'd be great.
Okay, so the standard is to reply within 24 hours. If it's very urgent, you can reply within the next 10 minutes, of course. But if somebody writes to you and you don't reply within 24 hours, that's not very professional. Another point I want to make has to do with using capital letters. And using capital letters in the subject line. In general, using capital letters is considered impolite, and writing in capital letters can be highly annoying and might trigger some unwanted response in the form of a flame email. So therefore, you have to try not to send emails with text in capitals. That's the recommendation. Okay, the attachment. Usually, when you send an attachment, you have to check whether you have attached the right file before you send the email, and you have to send not more than, I mean, it depends on the situation, but usually it is not recommended to attach many files to an email. Okay, so now we have come to the breakout rooms. My original idea was to divide you into 3 groups, and each of the groups has to work on a different writing task. And within the work group, you have to discuss the task with your colleague and start planning and drafting the respective document, trying to answer the questions that go with the assignment. Each group has to nominate a rapporteur who will have 5 minutes to present the result of your work group to the other webinar participants. The first breakout room. Your restaurant will need additional funds to handle the cost of the conversion, from electric to electronic ovens. In your letter to the bank, ask for an appointment to discuss the financing. Who are you going to address your letter to? How are you going to argument your request? And are you going to attach any documents to your letter? Second breakout room. You are the CEO of an NGO working with children. Compose a memo confirming the outcome of a conversation with a potential donor of your new advocacy campaign aimed at eliminating kindergarten fees. Who are you going to address your memo to? How are you going to organize your memo? The direct plan, the indirect plan, or the balanced plan? And the third task, sales have decreased for 3 consecutive months at your business. You are the sales director and you have been instructed to write an email to your sales team that their hours and base pay will be reduced by 20%. While you may have a few members of your sales team that are underperforming, you want to retain the entire team. Are you going to use the bad news formula? Who are you going to address the email to? Are you going to copy anyone? And are you going to attach any documents to the email? Okay, so is there a representative from Group 1 who would like to report the results of the work group discussion?
Yeah, okay, so basically, first we were discussing about to whom we should send the letter, because we got we are writing a letter for a loan, for financial support.
Right.
So we've chosen to write it to Department of Financial, who it may concern, because we do not know a person whom we're writing to, because there could be a lot of employees there, so we actually not sure to whom we should send it. So that's the most safe way is to who it may concern. So that's the answer for our first question. For who are we writing to? And then we're discussing about how we should argument our request. So basically, firstly, we were thinking about that we should introduce our business, about to write about our business, what are we doing, what kind of business is that. Also, we should introduce about how business is going. We should show that we are capable to give back the loan to the bank. Also, we should point the big improvement the new events could make for our business. Try to justify the costs for the events and for the loan. Also to show that modern events will help our business to improve more. And that was the second question, I guess. I don't know if I missed something. My team can say.
Well, yeah, okay.
We talk about save electric costs and improve the benefits of the company.
Yeah, you reduce your cost for electricity if you convert from electric to electronic ovens, okay? Good.
Yeah, and then we were talking about some attachments to the letter. Well, first, I think we should attach the budget of our business, the budget for the ovens, to show that we have chosen the best possible ovens on the market, that it's gonna improve our business and to show that they are the best one. Also, account statement for our business to show that we're capable to pay it back. And also some calculations of the budget we're having.
Excellent. You've done excellent work, actually. So as far as the first question is concerned, you're right. You have to consult the content of the letter with the representative of the finance department. And since this is going to be the first letter you're going to send to the bank, it should be, I mean, you should know who to address this letter to, and this should be a person who could be in the position to help you actually. And I think that's very important, and that's very reasonable that you decided to discuss the issue with the finance department. As far as the arguments you need to provide are concerned, you have to, I think the focus here is that your business is growing. Obviously, if you want to convert from electric to electronic, that means that you have a need for that and that your business is growing. And the attachments have to be, the attachment need to support and need to prove that your business is growing, flourishing, etc. And that, of course, if you get a loan, you'll be able to pay it back. And it was excellent work. Thank you. Good. So now let's move to breakout room 2 with the memo guys. Who is going to report on the work of group 2?
I will try to do my best.
Okay.
We were discussing because quite a lot about the people who would like to address the memos, because we are not too sure what we should do. But we decided to address our memo to legal, financial, and communication departments of the NGOs, because we decided to inform people who will be responsible for some, I don't know, changing procedures or to involve new solution in financial strategies, and to present some information about new donor to external audience, some other institution, local government or something like that. And because I don't have any experience in constructing memos, because we don't use them, so it was difficult to do it. But so we discussed about the way how to organize our memo, because in my opinion it will be enough if we use a direct plan, because we just inform about new solution and to present some new tasks for departments. But there was an opinion about balanced plan. It will be also helpful. So we didn't decide which will be the best. And we didn't end our task because the time was ended.
Okay.
But the main issue was discussion about the people institution in which we have to address that memo.
Okay, so it is not actually, in this case, we are talking about a memo, which is internal, method of internal communication. So if you are the CEO and you had a high-level meeting with a potential donor and the outcome of the meeting was positive, you as a CEO would like to share the results of the result of the meeting with your employees, right? And yes, I agree with you that you've decided to contact the communications and the legal department and what was the third department?
Financial, we called
the
it
financial. Sure. Yeah. Good. But these are all departments that might be involved in working on the advocacy campaign. And that's why you're very right in deciding to contact them. But I agree with you that you should, in this case, you should use the direct plan, because the purpose of the memo is to inform. You don't have to convey bad news or negative information. So it's quite okay if you simply inform the members of the respective departments that this meeting took place and that it had a positive outcome, and that you are planning to start working on this advocacy campaign. And now we move to the email with the negative information.
So I'll list what we heard, or what. I guess I'm the reporter.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Go on.
So in terms of what it is, are we going to use the bad news formula? Well, if I'm the sales director, I think it would be nice to use the bad news formula. I had to ask for a little bit of a reminder on it. So here are the 4 things. One, sort of an introduction, sort of a beat around the bush type of thing. Try to start like, hey, we've been working for many years trying to build the camaraderie, the company. We all want to be here. And then the reasons for why I'm sending the email says currently we're losing sales. So in terms of that, it kind of be direct. And then the bad news, which is where we were trying to discuss how to best convey it, because we don't want it to sound terrible, like everyone's losing hours. We were just starting around that. But the bad news would come directly. But we want to say that we want to keep going and keep growing. And we never got to the positive part about the bad news part yet. But the idea that we came together with is like, we have to tell this bad news, but in the positive part, hope that we want to stay working together and we want to improve. So in terms of that part, that's where we got in that question. In terms of the second point, who are you going to address in the email? So the email, we agreed it would be the entire team. But we were also wondering if we should also put in that email the guy who told me to write down, to email the team, because I'm the sales director and I've been instructed to write an email. So the question is, are we going to include that person? Is he going to be copied? But do we let the team know that he's going to be copied?
You mean the person who told you to write this email? You mean the director or the CEO, right? Because
so the person above me. So if I'm the sales director, do we tell the team that we sent this email, or do we not tell this director or CEO, say, here's the letter I plan to send, are you okay with this, and then send it? Or do we do we copy that person in the email? Or
I think neither of those. First of all, because if you're the sales director and if you have had a conversation with the CEO and the CEO told you that this is what's going to happen, and you have to inform your team, you have been, from that point on, you have been authorized to inform your team, and you are not obliged, so to say, to copy the CEO, because the CEO already knows what you're going to do, right?
Okay.
And as far as what was the second question? I forgot. So I don't think you have to copy the CEO to that correspondence, because once the CEO is involved in any kind of correspondence, this is going to be high-level correspondence. And in this case, it is not high-level correspondence, because you are the sales director talking to the members of your team, right? And the CEO has nothing to do with this kind of communication, because he already told you what you should do.
Okay. So in our case, we weren't thinking of someone like a CEO. We were thinking of someone who would be above us, because I didn't think I would be talking directly to the CEO.
Yeah.
So something like a managing sales director or something like that. So I guess the question would be where it goes in terms of that copy. And then in terms of the last part, the documents, we agreed probably there would be no documents attached to this, because we couldn't think of what would be the document we would have to attach other than someone telling us that we have to do this. But if this is a conversation sort of situation, then there's really nothing to attach from our perspective.
Any document, or how about any documents demonstrating that the sales have decreased? Or a proof of the claim that sales have decreased, just to make it more, I don't know,
We thought that would be
to
an idea.
support your argumentation in this way.
We thought that would be a good thing to send, but at the same time, we want to end on a positive note and to say, you know, here's the like somewhere in the email when you're revealing that bad news, saying attached is our last sales thing, and showing a negative sales decline over 3 months. We thought that would be more of a depressing stature.
Okay, I agree.
Rather than saying, of course, in the email you could always write, if you want to come talk to me, my door is always open. That's always a thing like that you can write into these emails.
Okay, well, what about the 3 guys, the underperformers?
So, because we wanted to take the entire team, we were kind of working on that part. That's where we can't we got cut off, unfortunately. And we were thinking the best way to, it was Anne Maria who said mostly that probably we would use the word for partially beyond our control, so not singling anyone out. For circumstances partially beyond our control. That way you don't single anybody out. And then you can say, okay, we have to, it just sends a message that we all have to do a bit better. Sometimes, I've been in terms of an email during my undergrad, I got singled out during a very bad email, and the person who did that ended up getting in trouble. So I know what it's like to be singled out and then for the other person to get in trouble. So we didn't want to point out any specifics, but to say that we do have to make it. I think the idea we were going to go is try to say there is some things that we have to do within the group consciousness, but don't single anybody out.
Okay.
We haven't got that anymore.
Yeah, would that involve, what do you think, would that involve writing another email or another email to those 3 underperformers, trying to, letting them know that their results are worse compared to the results of their colleagues, and trying to motivate them somehow?
In that case, I don't think it would. It might, from my perspective, I don't think that should be an email. That should be a conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's.
Yeah.
For me, with students in my past, students who aren't doing very well do better with a conversation, and if you write them an email, it tends to be it can be misinterpreted quite wrong, and these are delicate emails.
And also, if you write an email to the 3 of them, then they will know that they have been. The 2 guys will know that there is somebody underperforming, etc., etc. So you will disclose that information to the other 2, which is not a good idea. And if you have a personal conversation with each one of them, then it will be much more motivating for them if they know that their colleagues don't know that they have been underperforming, maybe. In session 3, we are going to discuss 3 workplace genres. So we are going to talk about project proposals, reports, business reports, and press releases. I'm sure you're all familiar with the first 2 genres, but I don't know whether you have had any opportunity to write press releases in your professional experience. Maybe those of you who work in communications or in marketing might benefit from using this genre. So the first, nothing wrong here. Okay, as far as project proposals, what are concerned, first of all, we are going to answer the question, what is the purpose of a project proposal? And we are going to talk about types of project proposals and their structure and organization. in general, project proposals are used to ensure funding, and a project proposal is a written document that is submitted to a donor or a sponsor, both public or private, with the purposes of securing funding. And there are different types of project proposals depending on their returns. We have fundamental research project proposals, and we have returns expected in 25 years. These are really big, extremely important research projects. Then we have applied research project proposals, for which returns are expected in 15 years, and development project proposals, returns expected in 5 years, and practical execution of a task. In this case, returns are expected on project completion. So you can see the link between the period within which returns are expected and the outcome of a specific proposal. In the case of fundamental research, we have uncertain outcomes. In the case of applied research, we have predictable outcomes. And in the case of development projects, we have outcomes which are expected. So I think we should focus on the role of project proposals within the project cycle. I am sure you're all aware of the project cycle and the different phases it consists of. Project proposals belong to the initial phase of the project cycle, namely the planning of the project itself. The second stage or phase has to do with the implementation of the respective project, and the final stage has to do with the monitoring and evaluation of projects. So, being part of this initial phase, project proposals are there to help an organization formulate the elements of the project and also plan the funding and the human resources needed to implement the project. You can see on this slide the different elements of the project proposal. So, in addition to the title page and the contents page, which are not that interesting, we have an abstract, a context, project justification section, project aims section, and project implementation section. And finally, we have a section devoted to the monitoring and evaluation of the respective project. I think that one of the most important things in terms of writing proposals has to do with being able to clearly identify the problem, the priority needs, and then to be able to identify a target group and formulate the project objectives, the project results, etc., etc. And now I would like to move to the second stage, so to say, of the project cycle. That is not the second, but it is part of the second and the third stage, because project reporting is done during the implementation phase on the one hand, and during the monitoring and evaluation phase. So what is a report? What is a business report? It is a statement of the results of an investigation or of any matter on which definite information is required. That is the definition of the Oxford English Dictionary. There are different steps in report writing, and the first step has to do with clarifying the terms of reference. By the way, project proposals are also designed on the basis of terms of reference, right? Then planning the work to be done, collecting the relevant information, organizing and structuring that information, writing the first draft, checking and rewriting. That is formally, from a formal point of view, the process of writing reports. There are different types of reports in terms of their subject matter, in terms of the period they cover, and in terms of the project phase to which they refer. So we can have laboratory reports, technical reports, field trip reports, or mission reports. And in terms of the period they cover, we can have annual, quarterly, monthly, and weekly reports. In terms of the project phase, which they refer to, we can have inception reports written in the very beginning, before actually the project has started, interim reports, and final reports. So there are many different types of reports. Are you familiar, or have you produced a report which is different from the types of reports mentioned on this slide? And are the reports you have produced, if you have produced any, related only to project work, or have you written any other types of reports? For example, reports on how students are doing or how they perform, or any other sorts of reports?
So I haven't been involved with any stuff like that. Mostly laboratory and technical reports. And the annual reports. But
annual reports in relation to project work, right?
Yeah, yes, project work.
Okay, good. Right. So the format and layout of project reports, they usually follow a very strict format. You can see the layout here on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, you see the sections of a typical report. We have the title page, the acknowledgements, contents, abstract or summary, introduction, then you have the methodology used, the results or findings, discussion of results, conclusions and recommendations, references, and any appendices or annexes to the report. Basically, the nature of press release is the following. It is a brief statement which outlines the major facts of a news story that you send to selected members of the media. And here the word targeted or select members has been underlined because they're journalists who work in different fields, right? So if you want to inform the media about the results of a project in the field of physics, for example, you will get in touch with certain journalists who work in that field. The purpose of the press release is to let the media know about an event that is happening, for example, or that is going to happen in the future, or which has happened recently. To let the media know about your business, if you are starting a new brand, let's say, or if your business is growing, you might want the media to know about it. Also, you can use press releases to help promote the appearance of your business on the internet or on different social media platforms. So you usually write a story that is newsworthy, that has some element of news in it, and you send it to targeted members of the media. Who to send the press release to? Those might be specific journalists or media outlets that might be interested in the story, or you might determine a specific media, for example, specific channel, TV channel or radio channel, or specific magazine or journal to send this information to. Examples of press releases. We can write a press release when there are, for example, some product updates, or when significant events are about to happen. And in the on this slide, you can see potential situations which require the writing of a press release. A company opens a local branch, bringing new jobs. University scientists announce study results. A theater group performs its new play. A non-profit organization sponsors a national project. So all those events are or could trigger the production of a press release. What is the structure? Usually this is a one-page document, and it consists of 3 parts: the headline, the lead, and the body. In the headline, you always write for immediate release. These are words which signal that this information is to be distributed by the media. And usually the words are written in capital letters. The lead contains the relevant contact information of the organization or the company which produces the news or the story, and includes the city where the release is generated and the date, along with a summary of the news. The body provides the full information on the news in descending order of importance. So specific information on the people the news is targeted for, and makes use of a quote, which helps the reader localize the news. So here are some tips for writing press release. Unfortunately, I cannot share PDF files on MS Teams, and along with the slides, I will ask the organizers to send to each one of you a couple of PDF files I had prepared for today's webinar, one of the files contains some useful expressions and phrases in writing business emails and business letters. The second file would be a sample press release. And I might include a third one on audience analysis. How do you analyze the profile of your audience, the people you are supposed to write to? Okay, so to go back to the tips for writing press releases. First of all, you have to make sure that the story you want to write about is unique and that it is timely. That is, it is news, actually. Secondly, you have to use a headline that sums up the entire story. That is the lead. It contains the relevant information and provides a summary of your story. Then you have to make your point quickly without and you don't have to bury the story. You have to find a balance between excessive self-promotion and dry facts, because press releases might be considered promotion materials to a great extent, because you promote something through them, be it an event or a new book or results of a project, etc., etc. So you should use a short paragraph that describes your business at the end of each press release, and you have to keep your sentences short and to the point, and stay as close to one page as possible, because no one would have the time to read press releases which are longer than that. Basically, again, we have 20 minutes for group work, 5 minutes for reporting the results, and here are the tasks I have prepared for you. The first task has to do with writing a project proposal. You are members of an environmental organization called Green Planet, and you have learned that an international donor organization has announced an open competition for quality projects that are community-based actions providing visible environmental benefits. The amount of funding is limited to 10,000 euros. You have to start discussing the outline of a project proposal to apply for funding. And in doing that, you have to take into account the basic elements of project proposals, namely stating the problem, identifying the priority areas, suggesting an approach and a methodology, formulating the objectives and the results of the project, identifying a target group, and thinking about project implementation, which involves schedule and budget, and monitoring and evaluation. So this is the first task. The second task. You are representatives of a university institution which is involved in an international consortium implementing a project for enhancing academic staff mobility. Your institution is responsible for writing the inception report under the project. Discuss and draft the overall organization of the report. Think of the elements you're going to include in the methodology section of the report. And the third task, a world-renowned communication expert, arrives in Bulgaria to give a talk on the topic, Social Media is Destroying Quality Human Interaction. Write a press release to inform the media. You have to discuss within the group the information you're going to include in the press release, how are you going to structure this information, and who are you going to quote? Because as we already said, one of the obligatory elements of press releases is the quote. So you need to quote somebody, an important person, or somebody who is knowledgeable in the field, or somebody who represents the event or the campaign, or I don't know what is the focus of the press release, but there should always be a quote. So in your discussion, you have to think about potential individuals you could quote. We will start with the feedback from group 1.
Okay, I can do it this time, maybe.
Okay, great, thank you.
So our project was, can you maybe share the slide, or? Yeah, this one. Yeah, so we were about to propose a project about, as it said here, community-based action providing visible environmental benefits. So our project, as regards environment, so our problem statement was how to reduce the use of plastic bottles. And so yeah, of course, our priority needs for this reduction of plastics and implementation of piping water dispensers. And a communication campaign related to this implementation. Yeah, the project, let's say that this project was to be implemented in a university campus. So the main objective was to reduce by 50% the plastic waste in the campus. Yeah, of course, the target is the whole university community. I mean, the whole university community using this main campus.
You mean both students and
yeah,
lecturers, administrative staff, everyone,
yeah,
right?
Everyone, yeah, that's correct. And yeah, the project's implementation was was calculated to take about 9 months, with implementation with these dispensers all around the campus. And the budget was supposed to be 50,000 euros. And considering we already have some funds for this project, but we need an extra funding. So this is why we are actually joining this competition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you planned to attract some co-financing, some donors, external donors to help you with the funding, or?
Well, we already.
You will rely on your own university's fund.
Yeah,
well, we actually.
Yeah, that's we rely on one hand on our university funding, on the other hand on some donations we already had in the past. And yeah, we also have plenty how to later evaluate and monitor these sections, these projects, which would be to take into account the statistics and the data from the company that's managing the waste, who's doing the waste management at the university campus. To start,
Okay.
yeah.
Good. How are you going to justify the problem? I mean, how are you going to justify that this is really a problem? Are you going to use any sort of research that has been done in this area and quote any studies, or how are you going to justify the need for implementing such a project?
Yeah, we haven't really discussed this, but because we actually kind of imply that reducing plastic is kind of it's an environmental benefit.
Okay. Have you considered, or did you have the time to discuss the impact of the project? So you're going to implement it in one university campus, but have you considered the short-term, mid-term, and long-term impact of the project, and maybe implementing similar projects in other universities in the country?
Well, basically, this we're thinking about to be based on the later evaluation to evaluate.
Part of the monitoring and evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay, good, very good. Any other comments from the members of the group?
Yeah, I think that we also talked about monitoring and evaluating, that we will use some statistics from the company who are, I don't know, taking waste from our campuses to show the statistics that after our project started, there's better situation, like it's less plastic waste.
Okay. And we could also make a campaign of polls to ask the opinion of the community and to get a feedback to for the future to implement this project, as you said, in other universities, for example.
Okay, great. And you mentioned something about an information campaign and awareness raising campaign. Did you discuss the details of that campaign? How are you going to organize it? What kind of campaign is it going to be? Are you going to, for example, have some flyers or brochures that you're going to disseminate among students? Or organizing some sort of events? Have you discussed that, or you didn't have time to do it?
We haven't discussed about it. We just discussed about doing some campaign.
Right. Okay. What do you think would be if you have to design such a project? What would be the most difficult thing for you to do in terms of designing it and writing it, because that's what we are actually discussing here?
To be persuasive, maybe. To
find the right arguments.
Yes, to find the right arguments. Yes, that's the most difficult thing.
And how about involving people? I mean, involving experts, because you certainly have to work with a number of experts in environmental experts. And do you think you'll have problems finding the right people for the project? And how are you going to attract them?
Yeah, of course, it's also a really tough task, but I think that it's a little bit easier than to make persuasive arguments for the funds to get the money, and then finding some experts would be easier if we would have money, so we could just propose them good terms.
Yeah, and as far as the argumentation goes, you have to think about the sustainability of the project, because once you introduce those dispensers, how sustainable that action would be. And I don't know, you have to think in that direction, because in terms of getting funding, I think sustainability is one of the most relevant and the strongest arguments that you might use. Good, thank you. Very good, excellent job. And now we want to hear our colleagues from breakout room 2.
Yes, so in room 2 we speak about our main goal is to encourage our staff to follow this staff mobility program. So we think that in our Inception report we have to explain that and to write in the our main structure has to involve that. So we think that explain possible destinations and programs as an introduction in our report is maybe it's an important point, and so we probably do that. In our overall organization of the report, maybe we include methodology. In the part of methodology, I mean an example of the bureaucracy and the process of the enrollment, and the travel and the different options in the destinations. I mean, we think it's important to show the possible destinations and programs, and make our staff to give a step to enrollment in this kind of programs. So the second question, I mean, it's important in sample for catch them or catch their attention and their possibly interest.
Do you think that I mean, are there lecturers or university people who do not want to take part in academic staff mobility, and what might be the reasons behind that? Of course, if we think in the context of the pandemic, for example,
yes.
Or I mean, yeah, this is the most recent development, but do you think that there are obstacles to taking part in academic staff mobility?
Well, I don't know if the decision is finally of the staff of this kind of institutions, or is a more higher decision. I think personally it's very interesting for our job, because we can share knowledge and we can share different tools, and well, probably this kind of reports can change the opinion of these institutions that don't have interest in these programs.
Okay, and have you outlined specific tools, methodological tools you could use?
Well, we speak about maybe we can the staff that goes to other institution, maybe when they come back to our institution, they can write a report or some kind of document with their experience to share with other workmates, and this could be a kind of evaluation of the program, and at the same time it can help us to enroll other people in our program.
Sure, or you could also use a questionnaire or focus groups with academic people, asking them, I mean, different sorts of questions related to academic mobility, and in this way draw some conclusions and use them in the, I mean, in the implementation, in the further implementation of the project. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And now we move to the last group with the press release.
In our group, we had to discuss the content of a press release, and the first question was to discuss which information we would include. And there we agreed on including who is the person, what are the person's credentials, and why is this person competent to give the talk. Also, who invited the person, or what institution invited the person, where and when does the talk take place. And then we would focus on the basic message or general points of the talk itself. We would also include the title of the talk. Yeah.
Okay. How about the quotation? Who are you going to quote?
We might quote experts from the same area, from the same field the talk is about. And yeah, that's where when we were broken up, but we could also include, for example, a quote of the person who invited the expert, or also quotes of the talk itself, one very general or informative phrase of the talk.
Okay, so in this task, you don't really know who invited the expert and who is actually, I mean, the organization or the institution that is writing the press release. That's not clear in the task, but that might be a company, that might be, I don't know, social media is destroying quality human interaction. That is something against social media, maybe. I don't know, but it's certainly an institution or an organization or an NGO, and you might use some people or a person who has worked with that organization or institution in promoting their objectives and quote this person in the press release. And let's not forget that the press release is a promotion, a sort of a promotion material. And through it, you could promote the activity of your organization, right? And the last line of you'll see in the sample press release that the organizers will send to you via email, you'll see that the last line actually of every press release has to do with saying that the readers could go to the website of the organization where they could find more information. And this is also a way to promote the organization itself and to promote its website, its web presence in general.
Yeah.
Okay, so you should always think about press releases as persuasive promotion materials. Okay, good. Okay, anyone?
Maybe I will start. It was interesting for me for many reasons, but the most I am really interested in memos because I've never used it, and it's quite good to summarize some activities to present outcomes to person who will be involved in some matters, and I think it's quite a good idea, and I will check is it possible to use it at my work, because maybe it will be helpful, not just receiving so many emails and information. Maybe some kind of summarize will be helpful. And it was really nice to meet someone else from other university. It was really great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So you learned about a new professional genre. That's great. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. I would like to thank you for your active participation, for being so nice, and also for your patience. And this is my contact information. This is my email address that you could use. I mean, please do not hesitate to contact me if you need anything, I mean, in relation to workplace writing, or if you would like to clarify something as far as this webinar is concerned. And as I mentioned a couple of times, I would ask the organizers to send to you the materials which I couldn't share during the webinar. So thank you once again. I would like to thank the organizers once again for their support, and I wish you a nice afternoon.